Searching the web for the most talented, creative, and intriguing independent authors.
Master, your stories are ready.
Oh, goody. The Emit Blackwell Show, diving into the creative minds of sci-fi, fantasy, horror, and paranormal authors. Their fantasy is our reality. Thank you once again for joining us here on the Emit Blackwell Show. We've got a very exciting show, and before we begin, I want to remind everybody to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Tonight, we have Pierre Arseneault and Angella Cormier, and this is a story that you're going to like. I'm surprised at how these two even met, and I'll give you a little hint. It started out with a box of books. And without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right into this with an excerpt from their book, Oakwood Island. Chapter 1. Maggie. Running out into the cold January night was enough to snap Maggie back into reality. Her short legs, weak and tired already, began running shakily. On her feet were a pair of oversized men's work boots that she had grabbed in haste at the trailer. Her legs shook with each pounding step she made in the white blanket that covered the ground. She had also grabbed a large parka from the dead body, along with the boots, to ensure she wouldn't freeze during her sprint to safety. The coldness produced little vapor clouds escaping from her mouth every time she exhaled a deep and ragged breath. She could feel her lungs hurting already, trying to get as much air in her as possible. Though her eyesight was blurry, she kept on, trying not to think too much. Keeping her focus on her heavy and strenuous steps, she ran, her long brown hair sticking to her face from sweat that had started forming on her forehead. Her body was reacting to whatever had been done to her, but she needed to keep those thoughts out of her mind and just get help. Straight ahead, Maggie could see the driveway had not been plowed since the last storm. The navy blue van that had stopped and asked for directions was now parked in front of the trailer home, a white blanket masking the evil that resided within its metal and plastic body. The day Maggie's nightmare had begun started like any other Monday. She was a waitress over at the Old Mill restaurant located in the central area of Oakwood Island. She normally worked the breakfast shift and enjoyed seeing the customers who were also friends and almost like family to her. She knew most of them by name, having grown up on the island herself. While she was an orphan and had shared a home with many other kids, she had known that the Oakwood Island community would always be there for her, like a big extended family. Her apartment was just down the street and around the corner from the restaurant. However, it was during this short walk that the very essence of her life was severely changed. The darkness had not yet lifted in her corner of the world, the sun only starting to stretch its first signs of rays on the horizon. Her pace had been steady, with quick, even steps as the first month of the new year had brought about a fresh cold snap to the area. Maggie had been so occupied with getting to her destination that she never noticed the dark blue van that slowly passed her in the opposite direction, and then turned to follow the last quick, even steps she would make. As the van rolled alongside her and slowed to match her pace, Maggie turned her face and smiled at the man who peered back at her with inquisitive eyes. She pulled up the zipper of her white winter coat a bit and fluffed up her big red scarf before she approached the van as the passenger side window lowered. She came right up to the window, with her feet half on the curb and half dangling over a balancing act between her current, normal, uneventful life and swinging towards a broken remains of the self she would become. Her blue jeans caught a bit of the salty mess on the side of the van, but she wasn't the type to worry about that sort of thing. She was too interested in the driver of the van. He was handsome. His hair dark, eyes piercing green. His smile had been what drew her in closer, without hesitation or the usual precautions she might have taken. The driver turned a bit in his seat to talk to Maggie. "Sorry, miss. I know it's a pretty cold day, and you look like you're in a rush, so I won't keep you for long." Bending at the waist and crossing her arms at the passenger side door, she replied, "That's all right. What can I help you with?" In the instant she blinked, she saw what really lay before her, but had no time to escape. Maggie stood paralyzed in horror, her mouth trying to scream, but her mind could not process what was happening fast enough to respond. The eyes that only seconds before had been warm and, dare she say it, flirtatious, were now wide open. No lids covering the bright pulsating glow that came from the widening pupils. The smile she had seen seconds before morphed into a twisted protrusion of several sharp teeth. The man's jaw was somehow opening wider than what should have been humanly possible. Maggie felt her body lift from the curb and pulled inside the van through the passenger window with a violent force. The creature's claws had pierced not only her winter jacket and hoodie, but also her soft skin. Maggie felt those punctures on her arms burning and throbbing just before everything went black. Her nightmare had only just begun. The stench of something burning roused Maggie out of her sleep. Panic set in. Her eyes flew open, but any movement was impossible. Ankle and wrist restraints of some sort tied her down to a cold metal slab in a darkened room. The smoke she had smelled was coming from outside. There was but a trace of the smell now. A minute or so passed before her eyes could make out that she seemed to be in some kind of dingy homemade operating room. Looking down and past her feet, she could make out the outline of the only door in the room. The door was closed, but she saw a thin sliver of light peering from the side and bottom. The walls offered no hint of any windows, at least none that she could make out in the dark. The complete stillness and quiet of the room made her uneasy. At first she hadn't taken notice, as her rapid breathing and pounding heart had resonated loudly in her head. But as her breath evened, she felt the oppressive sound of silence to be even more terrifying. Snapping her head quickly to the left and then to the right, she saw only shadows. Darkness peered back at her with its mocking grin, omnipresent in every sense. Maggie shook uncontrollably on the table, though still wearing her jeans and hoodie. Her jacket and boots were gone. The room had no heat, and she shivered on the metal slab. She tried to free her hands from the large metal straps. Useless. The metal pressed lightly against the back of her wrist, so much that she could only move her hand about half an inch left or right. Her ankles felt shackled in the same fashion. Her scream shattered the silence, uncontainable. It echoed throughout the room, slamming back into her. It stopped as fast as it had started, realizing she was putting herself in danger by announcing she was awake to that thing. Maggie dredged the memory from the back of her mind. Surely it was a dream, being grabbed by the creature, and knocked out. Surely she had imagined it all. Tears welled up in her eyes as she could not be certain anymore. The eyes. They had appeared surreal, not even animal-like. They had been pulsating. Like a heartbeat, the pupils had been bright yellow, glowing internally. With each throbbing push, they had pulsed brighter still. The room became darker, and Maggie's eyes closed again, her body limp on the table. In the coming days, she would wish for the ability to faint, if only temporary, to block out the horror she would encounter. The man stood just a foot away from the door to the dark room where Maggie lay shackled to the metal table. The reasoning, a part of him thought, was that even though she would lose her life by his hands, his own would have served a greater purpose. The curse he was afflicted with would become hers too, but only for order to be restored. In his mind, this made perfect sense. Wow. Talk about a terrifying excerpt. And I have the authors right here on the show. Pierre and Angela, are you there?
Yep.
Yeah, we're here.
Wow. I tell you what, just that excerpt alone, and that's chapter 1?
It's the beginning of the book. It's I believe it's chapter 1. There's a prologue before that one.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's the beginning of the story. It goes in many directions. So that's just a teaser.
Yeah, well, that's quite the teaser you threw at us. I'm telling you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, it's very good. I like it a lot. So now you guys have written a couple of books together, Oakwood Island and Dark Tales for Dark Nights. And then, Pierre, you actually published a book by yourself solo, Sleepless Nights. And I want to talk a little bit about the excerpt first. Now, this excerpt, we just read it. It's this woman is running. She encounters this thing, and then she's thrown on this slab. I mean, it takes you in so many different places in such a short amount of time. Where did you get the inspiration for this kind of story?
Well, there were many different places of inspiration or sources of inspiration for Oakwood. Mm-hmm. Actually, Oakwood Island started off as individual short stories in the very beginning. I wanted to create an island where I could write short stories about. So every short story would be about a character or person on the island. And I wrote, I believe, 3. And I would bring them to Pierre, and he would read them and give me some feedback. And anyways, and he mentioned to me one day, why don't you try to make a book out of them, like a bigger story? Mm-hmm. And I didn't really know how to do that. I liked the idea, but I couldn't really picture how I would bring it all together. And so that's when the collaboration started. Now, as for the inspiration for the stories, I guess it was just imagining this island in my mind and what kind of spooky, creepy, and weird stuff that I could make happen on this island. So it was, it was all from different places, but my imagination, I guess, is where it came from.
Well, yeah, and that's a great way to build on a story premise. Is it's almost like creating a dome. Create this world that only the stuff that falls out of your imagination can happen in, and you can go so many places. It could be a town, it could be a city, it could be anywhere, a planet for some of our sci-fi lovers out there, and just throw all the stuff that you want to inside that arena and see what happens. So I really like that. So
I just want to get a word in here because every time we talk about this, it's always interesting because when Angela first wrote those 3 short stories, we weren't collaborating yet. Oh. And what was happening is we were starting to talk about different things. And every time she'd give me one of these, I'd absolutely love it. And I wanted to know what was coming next. And that's when the talk of building upon it came up. And that's when we started working together. And the stories were just so amazing. And those 3 stories are 3 of the chapters in the book. They're not in sequence, but they're in the book.
Yeah, so you were like your first fan.
Yes.
Oh.
All right. And so then, Pierre, when did you start writing? Or do you do another part of the collaboration?
In collaboration, it's kind of an interesting idea because we draw from each other's strengths. Mm-hmm. Angela's a much better writer than I am. I'm more the wild and crazy ideas guy, but we blend. It's not a perfect division. Oh yeah, we definitely blend that. So it's a lot of fun. Myself personally, I always wanted to write, but I'd never delved into it until I reached, I think, when I was like 40.
Which is the new 20 for anybody out there who's listening, by the way.
Good point.
Thank goodness.
Although I'm feeling very old, that's a good point. But I started writing my own stuff, and at first it was pretty horrible. Angela helped me out with that quite a bit. She taught me a few things when we started working together. So yeah. Yeah,
that's awesome. So when you started writing, you were just kind of getting your feet wet, and you were kind of bouncing ideas off of Angela because she was already writing, correct?
Yeah, I always wanted to tell stories. I just never actually sat down to try it. I always thought I could. And Angela has been dabbling with that all her life, so we had just never taken it seriously.
Yeah. And Angela, when did you start writing then?
Well, when I started writing, the first time that I remember actually writing and enjoying it, like doing it for pleasure, was when I was 12. I started writing poetry, as any young girl would do. And that's where I started, just writing poetry. Eventually, I wrote, little short stories here and there. So yeah, I was about 12 when I first started.
And a little birdie told me too, Angela, that you do graphic design.
Yeah, that's right. I started that quite a few years ago. I studied interactive multimedia at a local school, a college here, and I took to the graphic design aspect of that course, and yeah, I've been doing it ever since.
Wow. So now, how did you two meet as far as like were you friends this entire time?
The meeting is always a fun story to tell.
It's my favorite part.
It's always a very fun story to tell. I, like anybody else, you like to read. I'll make this short. I went to a yard sale, wanted to buy a couple books from this lady. Used books, but there were books I really wanted. She had a full box. She sold me the whole box for, I think, $5. She wouldn't take the sale for just the books. I had to buy the whole box. So I had extras. I had extra copies of books that I already had. I had books that so I put them up for sale on a website, kind of like your Craigslist. Here it's called Kijiji. And Angela replied to the ad. And
I was looking for Stephen King books, and he had some books for sale, so I replied to the ad to buy some books.
Wow.
And so ended up, on his doorstep wanting to buy the books, and we started having a chat about writing and reading and these kinds of books. And I write, I like to write, and he said the same thing. And yeah, lo and behold, I think 2011 I think is when we met that way. And so we kind of blossomed from there.
Wow, that's cool. And just, for our listeners here, this is a very professional relationship. There's no relationship that you guys have between yourselves, correct?
Yeah, we're good friends. We're really good friends.
And co-writers.
Yeah, and collaborators, and yeah.
Okay, and some people, when they do get into a collaboration, it is like a romantic situation, and there can be a lot of tension there that can stifle the creativity. Would you guys agree?
Oh, we have a pretty unique sense of humor, and so humor is what keeps us going.
Yeah.
It's we started out having fun with the writing. We both love movies. We like a lot of the same stuff. Like, I'm more of the horror stuff, and Yale likes horror too, but he likes all kinds of stuff, and I do too. But it was just a similar taste. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love stories that.
I love stories. We started chatting about all kinds of stories we loved, and books we liked, and movies we liked, and it just kind of progressed from there, and we became friends.
But yeah, sometimes do we have disagreements, or do we, think maybe, I think we should do this, and no, I think we should do that. Well, we compromise, right? We kind of meet in the middle somewhere, and.
Yeah, and that's one thing with a friendship that you wouldn't be able to get in like a romantic relationship is when that split happens, it's like you're in court, rather than you're just friends and you disagree and then you come back and laugh about it later. So, I really commend you guys for doing that, because it is such a professional yet, not so professional relationship that you are friends and you're able to collaborate and you're able to bounce ideas off of, get arguments, and then you take those arguments and put you down in paper.
Yeah. I guess the big thing is trust, right? Like, I trust Pierre, and I know that he trusts me. And so that's where, it's our professional relationship. We don't worry about that other stuff that could potentially happen, because we both trust each other with our work and with our ideas and everything else in between. So
yeah, and that's a great way to do it. That's a great way to think about it. And Pierre, you wrote Sleepless Nights. What's the premise of Sleepless Nights? Because we haven't talked about that much.
It's an anthology.
Okay.
Both our first books, Dark Tales, was an anthology as well. Sleepless Nights is an anthology. It's got 9 short stories. If you read it in order, because there is links between the stories. And essentially, it was just me exploring what I could do and what kind of stories I wanted to tell. And I was just having a lot of fun with it. There's a mixture of stories in there. There's some paranormal. There's some. It's an interesting blend, but it's not as dark. I find I don't write as dark when I'm not writing with Angela. That's kind of funny, isn't it? She's kind of giggling over here. But
it's an evil giggle.
But no, our first 2 books were anthologies because we were mainly just trying to write short stories. And, which is ironic because that's how Oakwood Island started, as short stories as well.
Yeah, and your books can all be found. Where can you find your books so that our readers can get out there and check these things out?
The best place would be on Amazon.com. They're all available there. And so that's usually where we guide people. The way they're available in a lot of different websites and places online, but Amazon is probably the best place.
They're all available as ebooks and paperbacks. But Oakwood Island's also an audiobook, as a matter of fact.
Oh, wow. So I'm going to ask you about that. What was that experience like? How did you guys like doing the audiobook thing? Did you have somebody else do it?
Yeah, it was through our publisher. Our publisher put it together. The Shadow Dragon Press is our publisher for Oakwood Island. And he put it together. It was a fantastic experience. We didn't really do a lot of the work. He had a company that he worked with do the audiobook.
Cool. And that, I'm sure that can probably be found on Amazon too, right?
Yes.
All right. And you guys actually have a couple of you guys have one new book coming out, correct?
That's right. Yeah, we're currently working on the second volume of Oakwood Island. And we're about halfway through the first draft. So we're not sure yet when it'll come out, but we're working on it.
Yeah, there is a sequel to Oakwood Island coming in the works. We've talked about how we're going to take the story and keep developing it. So I just want to throw it in there. We mentioned earlier you were talking about Angela being a graphic designer.
Yeah.
If you look at the covers of Dark Tales and Oakwood Island, those are both Angela's work. And my next one coming up, my next solo book, is Angela's work as well for the cover. So,
all right. Yeah, and so we're going to be able to see that artwork coming up here soon then, right?
In a bit, yes. I'm not exactly sure what the deadline is, but that book's on its way. It's well underway. Volume 2 is in the works. It's going to be a bit before we get that one finished.
Yeah.
All right. And I'd like to encourage everybody out there to check out these stories. Just like that excerpt that I read, it's chilling, okay? And Pierre had mentioned that he had written the other stuff, too, that was not always so chilling when Angela's not around. But it looks like you guys have a great collection of stories that I want to take this back in my own mind, and I hate to do that, but it's almost like those scary campfire stories. You know, something that, it would terrify you and you'd be kind of scared in the middle of the woods, just like in this one.
That would be the effect.
Yeah. That's our goal, scare the pants off of people.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and I'd like to ask both of you guys, now, what advice would you give an author who's just getting started? And I'll start with you, Pierre.
That's always an interesting question. It's, everybody wants to say right, just right. It's a basic answer. It's kind of an easy answer. Read as well, but don't be afraid to kind of read something that's out of your comfort zone or something else. You got to expand your horizons. One thing that we are trying to do now is to, associate more with other readers and writers to try to, gain, like you said earlier, gain experience, learn from them, and teach them what we can to help each other out. Writing's an interesting venture. You have to do it because you love it. There's no other reason that you should do it.
Yeah, and I would say, don't be afraid to take that risk of buying some books off of Craigslist and meeting a co-author too,
Never know. You just never know what's going to happen.
You never know what's going to happen with a box of books.
Right.
So, and Angela, so I'm going to pose the same question to you. What would you give as far as advice to a new author?
Well, again, just like Pierre said, read a lot, write a lot. Doesn't matter if anybody else is ever going to read it. Just write. And the other part that for me has always been important is write for the love of it and for the fun of it, and do that first. And then, if you're wanting to get it published, if you want to get an agent, whatever, then focus on that. But when you're writing, just write. Don't worry about, is this going, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because when it becomes a job or a task, or for me personally, like I need to schedule time to write, and it's not as fun, I find.
Yeah.
when I used to do that versus when I have all day and I don't have to do anything else. I'm just doing it for fun. It feels different. And I find the writing flows a lot better, and it's a lot easier to read too.
Yeah, and I'd like to thank you both for being here on the show today, because we just love having co-authors on, because you guys are so dynamic. And I love your story. And I'm going to once again encourage everybody out there to go ahead and check out Amazon.com, check out the audiobook, check out the books that they have. Oakwood Island was the excerpt that we read once again. And I'd also like to remind everybody to like, share, and subscribe to any one of the platforms that we have. Do all that clicky stuff in order to get involved here on the Emit Blackwell Show. And this is Emit Blackwell signing out. Keep on reading and keep on writing.
Searching the web for the most talented, creative, and intriguing independent authors.
Master, your stories are ready.
Ooh, goody. The Emit Blackwell Show, diving into the creative minds of sci-fi, fantasy, horror, and paranormal authors. Their fantasy is our reality.